Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very happy that Yvonne Vissing is here to discuss a generation which is actually not represented at all in this conference, but I think obviously essential as we discuss the future developments of the world. Yvonne Vissing is director of the Center for Childhood and Youth Studies, as well as a professor of sociology at Salem State University. She's also policy chair for the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. Her work focuses on community change efforts, particularly in the area of economic justice, social, physical, and mental well-being of children, homelessness, food and poverty, criminal justice, and parenting strategies. Her topic is child rights in the United States, 25 years later and counting. Please give a warm welcome to Ms. Yvonne Vissing.
Thank you so much. I would especially like to thank all of the people who made this day possible, especially the center, because this is a rare opportunity. As we learned last night, we're all hummingbirds, right? And we're doing what we can. And so my contribution to this day is to look at human rights from a child perspective. So as you know, the U.S. is the only member country of the United Nations that is not ratified or in the process of the Convention on the Rights of the Child. This is an embarrassment, right? Just so that you know. So I would like to talk about child rights today. We talk about white privilege, but we don't usually talk about adult privilege. And we talk about children in ways that we wouldn't deem unacceptable if we changed other demographic characteristics. If we said the same things and inserted gender or race or religion characteristic, we wouldn't get away with it, but we can use disparaging conversation about children regularly. Right? We're going to look at children from a different point of view instead of our adultified point of view. All right. So the U.S. has not ratified the CRC. It doesn't mean that children are unimportant, because certainly there are activities among a variety of people to try to protect children, but we have our own complicated system of sovereignty, states' rights, and political issues that haven't made this possible. So legislatively, the needs of the child are not adequately addressed. So you come from countries that have ratified the CRC, and I would only question, how well does your country address the best interest of all of your children? All right. How important is the CRC and human rights treaties, really? Okay, how can they be better enforced? All right. So in my field as a sociologist, we talk about the difference between real and ideal culture. And ideal culture is what we want to believe is true. Like, we love our children and we take very good care of them as the most precious aspect of our future. The real culture is that we often don't put them as best interest. We don't put their interest in decision-making, policies, and funding. All right. Many of them are not well cared for, and they experience preventable hunger, homelessness, poor education, and conditions that we deem unthinkable for civilized society. We know that individually some children face good futures and others not. These seem to be based on demographic characteristics such as gender, race, nationality, sexual orientation, and certainly, as you point out, social class. You may have heard that in the US, we're at a political fork in the road, right, about which way we're going to travel. It's a grave concern to us. I think that as the issue of children is concerned, we are also at a significant fork in the road to determine how we are going to socialize our children to assume the reins of leadership for tomorrow. We know that the minds of children are formed in the early years, and what they learn to be true, good, and right early in life sets them up for belief and behavior patterns later on. Okay. You can regard this as a form of branding, if you would use a consumer point of view. We know that experts in the fields want to hook children early so that they will continue to purchase their brands. Well, I'm not talking about the purchase of designer clothes or iPhones or Cadbury chocolate here. I'm talking about how adults who have special interest and agendas brand children to view the world in a particular way. Capturing the minds of children is one of the greatest human rights issues of our time, and we need to be much more attentive to how we are allowing them to be socialized. We see that this includes corporate, it includes parenting, religious, ideological views of who is good, who is bad, who is right, who is wrong. The seeds of injustice and intolerance are sown early in a child's life. They are fed, watered, and nurtured, and as the child grows, their attitudes grow as well. And that's why it is fundamentally important that they learn human rights early in life. We know that the bifurcation between the rich and the poor, the haves and have-nots, the powerful and the powerless is great and getting greater. Tolerance and intolerance are in a contest, and it's not clear at this point in time which will reach the finish line first. I'm a researcher, and I believe that data will help us. We know that the investments in early childhood education matter. The 42 articles of the UNCRC provide a framework for what we should be measuring. So I would ask you, does your country, measure according to the UNCRC? Okay, I would be happy to help design these kind of instruments so that we can prove that human rights matters. All right. So one of the arguments we face in the US is they say, well, if these other countries have ratified the CRC and there's still exploitation and hunger and homelessness and abuse, then why should we do it? Well, if you're taking good care of your kids, would you please have the data so that I can prove to my country that the human rights matters? I think that data is important, and so I'm offering to help work with you to design and collect data systems. It's my view that the best interest of the child is usually an afterthought instead of a primary principle. All right, and so we would need to shift this. I've been doing some work in human rights education and find that in some countries, human rights education is provided in preschool all the way through university. In my country, it's not provided at all. If we have education on human rights, it's about civil rights or the women's movement. There's no courses that design to teach children that they have rights and that others have rights. So it should be absolutely no surprise to find that young people grow into young adults and older people who violate others' rights and who think that terrorism is perhaps an acceptable alternative if they never learned that there are human rights for which all people are entitled. All right, and so do you have curriculum in human rights that your schools use? If you do, would you send them to me? I would love to see them. I would like to put together some absolutely stellar human rights education curriculum, because from preschool on, I've looked at over 100, 150 different types, and I'm not finding a really strong one, despite, the UNICEF tries, but I don't think that it is as strong as it should be either. I don't think that parenting education is very good in general, and that professional education needs to be improved. While people in social work or psychology may be pretty good, people in criminal justice education, childcare may not. Okay, so I have, as I wrap this up, I think that there's hope for child rights enforcement. I think that the demographic characteristics of youth are changing, that there's more migration, intermarriage, cultural and racial and religious transmission and intermingling. I think that young people are intolerant of injustice and that this is a helpful thing. And the internet has actually been very useful to making them see themselves as global citizens. I think we should remember that the UNCRC and the Declaration of Human Rights were written before the internet came about. And so we are behind the times, that young people spend an extraordinary amount of time online, that they spend more time looking at that than they do in school. Our modes of transmission of human rights education is outdated. We need to use technology to be helpful. ISIS and other organizations are using it quite effectively to mobilize. Are we as a human rights community using it effectively? I don't think so. So as we start to dwindle down here, I am offering you the following. I'm offering to be your partner. I will help you with data gathering and research design. I would like to work with you to help create human rights educational training materials and assessment to prove that it matters if you train kids in human rights early, that it has a long-term benefit. I would like to work with you to see how we can do some electronic medium. I'm working with some designers now trying to move in this direction. So how can we do this together? I'm writing a book on, I've been asked by the University of California Press to do a Sociology of Children and Youth book. Do you know almost everything written is from a Western and British and US point of view? There's almost nothing written from the history of children and children's rights in a comprehensive way. If you would like to work on this with me or have people in your countries, let's do it. Let's develop a more global approach. All right, so in closing, I will give you two short quotes. One is from Mahatma Gandhi. It says, "Peace between countries must rest on the solid foundation of love between individuals." And as Pema Chodron reminds us, we must train our children to see that others are not so different from ourselves. We must train them in opening our hearts and minds, especially in increasingly difficult situations. Choosing to cultivate love rather than anger might be exactly what it takes to save the planet from extinction. Thank you very much.